Welcome to this Treehouse workshop where myself, Matt Helm,
and Gil Hernandez
will be designing a basic header for a website in Adobe Illustrator
and HTML and CSS.
Some designers like designing in the browser, while other designers like designing an application. Today, we're going to do both at the same time. To start off, I'm going to have Adobe Illustrator open, and I'm going to start off with a document at 1,000 pixels by 80 pixels. Now, I've previously made a sketch for this header, which I've placed in a layer labeled Sketch. Now, on top of that, I have another layer called Color Palette. Now, this color palette I have already given Gil, so he can reference the colors for his CSS. And then, on top of that, I have a layer with social icons. I have a Facebook icon and a Twitter icon. I will be using both of these in the header. Now, I'm all set and ready to go. Gil, what do you need?
I'm all set. I am using Sublime Text 2 as my code editor. Check it out. It's a very powerful editor. I'm also using, to pick the color palette you sent me, to select the values, I'm using a cool little app called Color Snapper, which selects all of the values in your monitor, any color you want, and copies it to your clipboard, and all you have to do is paste it in your CSS. So it's one less step. It's pretty cool.
Nice. So you have already set up your HTML document,
I do.
right?
I have my standard boilerplate code linked to my style sheet. And the only styles I have in my style.css file is just some really basic reset files where I am removing the margins and paddings from the elements I'll be using, like HTML, body, div, nav. And I'm also removing the list style bullets from the unordered list, which I will use to style the navigation.
Right. Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to start off by making the header have a background color. So I'm going to deselect the social icons, the color palette, and have my sketch layer open, invisible. On top of that, I'm going to create a new layer, and then grab the shape tool, which is on the rectangle tool right now. And I'm going to create a rectangle. And with that rectangle selected, I'm going to get rid of the stroke, head back over to my layers panel, and make my color palette visible. And now with the rectangle selected, I'm going to press I on the keyboard to select the eyedropper and select this light color orange. And now I have my background color set. Now I want to make this a gradient. So to do that, I'm going to select the gradient panel and select the gradient. Now right now it's going from white to black and from left to right. Now I want to go top to bottom. So I'm going to change the angle to -90 degrees. So as you can see now, the bottom is black with the top white. So what I want to do is make that lighter color orange, which we eyedropped, which I have over here in my swatches, drag it right on the black. And then for the top, I'm going to grab this darker color orange and drop that on the white. And there we are. Now, I want to have a 5-pixel border on the bottom of this header. So to do that, I'm going to copy and then paste over top, which is Control-C, and then Control-Shift-V, which will place it right on top. And then select the darker colored burgundy and place that underneath, grab the top rectangle and push it up just a bit. So now when we hide our sketch, we can see we have a nice looking header, background color with border here using the gradient. Now I'm going to pass this over to Gil. And Gil, so we need to do a background color, which is going to be a gradient.
Yep.
Now you can do that with CSS, right?
Absolutely.
And then we're just going to need a 5-pixel bottom border.
Sure. That is looking really awesome, Matt. So in our markup, I'm just starting out with a header element here. And I'll go ahead and add the width in our style sheet. And the width, you said it was
1,000 pixels.
Okay.
Yep, 1,000
So
pixels.
I'll select the header here. Apply the width of 1,000 pixels. And you mentioned it was 80. However, we do have a 5-pixel border at the bottom.
Correct. Yep.
So I'll make it 75 pixels. Now for our background, I will do a linear gradient. So linear gradients are, we still have to use the vendor prefixes because they are still in the candidate recommendation stage. So hopefully soon we will not have to use them once they become a final web standard. So for now, we will be using the WebKit vendor prefix.
That's future stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So for our color values, I'll use our little handy color picker here. So I'll select this lighter orange value. All I have to do is paste that in there. And I'll go ahead and select this lighter value here. So we're going from top to bottom. And then I'll do a border bottom. And then 5 pixels, correct?
5 pixels, yep.
Cool. And I'll use this darker value here. I'll also apply a margin of 0 auto so we can center things. Let's go ahead and refresh that. And there you go. It's looking good.
Perfect. All right, so next we're going to create the logo. Now we're not actually going to use a logo in this. We're just going to use a placeholder. We're just going to use Arial Black as a font and just write out the word logo. We're going to grab the text tool. And we don't really need to break this up into layers. We'll just keep it all in the same layer. And we will type out logo, select all that text, and we will then select Arial Black, make that text white, scale it up just a little bit. We'll place it right on the left side. There we go. I'm going to zoom in here. And now we just want to put in a drop shadow on this. So to do this, we're going to select Effect, Stylize, Drop Shadow, and set the mode to normal, opacity to 100, the X offset to 0, the Y offset to, let's say, 4 pixels, blur to 0, color. Let's go ahead and grab the darker orange, like so. Let's preview it. All right, let's tuck that up into 3 pixels. And there we go. So now we have a nice little placeholder for our logo. We added a drop shadow to it. It's looking pretty slick.
Cool.
So Gil, can you show us how to do that?
Sure, I'll go ahead and mark that out. I'll just start out with an anchor element for the logo since we're using HTML text. And I'll just go ahead and add a class here of logo. And then I'll type in our text. So back in our style sheet, first I want to remove all the text decorations from our anchor elements in our header. That way we don't have the underline going on. So I'll just set that to none. Now we'll go ahead and select our logo class. So you mentioned it was Arial Black, correct?
Yep.
Cool. So we'll just give it a font size of about 3.4M. But before we do that, I want to go ahead and apply a font to the body. So I'll just give it a font size of 100%. It could either be 1M, which is 16 pixels, but I'll just keep it at 100%, which is the same thing. Give it a line height of 1, and I'll just use a standard sans serif font. Cool, so we'll go back to our logo, and we'll apply a color of white, and I'll include the font family here of Arial Black. All right, see how that's looking? Okay, there it is. So I'll go ahead and give it the text shadow. You mentioned it was a 4-pixel offset, correct?
Yes.
Cool, so we'll do that. 0 offset horizontally, 4 pixels down, and I'll go ahead and select this lighter value here as the shadow. Refresh that, there's that. And I see that you have a little bit of kerning going on.
I didn't apply that yet.
Okay.
So yeah, let me apply that. Let me put a little kerning on this.
Cool.
So with the text selected, I am going to add minus 100 on the kerning. And yep, there we go.
Nice. Well, for that tracking effect, I'll just do letter spacing of about -4. That should do it. Position our logo. Let's say 20 pixels to the left. There you go.
Nice. Now for the drop shadow, I ended up changing the offset to 3 pixels. So you can easily
Absolutely.
change it,
That's
right?
what
Perfect.
designing in the browser is all about.
Perfect.
There you go.
Awesome. It's quick. Okay, so next we're going to create a navigation of, I'm going to make 3 different buttons for 3 different statuses. We're going to have the default, hover, and then active. So to do that, I'm going to jump back over to Adobe Illustrator and grab the rounded rectangle tool and create a button here. And we are going to give it a background color. Now I want to show you something really quick here. The difference between using a rounded rectangle tool and using the rectangle tool. That if I create a button, like I've created up top here, and I stretch it, the actual curve of the rounded corner here stretches. So there's a trick that we can use with Adobe Illustrator CS6. And the way we do this is by selecting the rectangle and then going to Effect, Stylize, and then Rounded Corners. And then this way I can actually set the radius on this rectangle as an effect. So I'm going to select it at 10 pixels and we can preview it. And now notice when I stretch it, our 10 pixel radius is current throughout. It's not getting stretched like when we use the rounded corners.
That is a really neat trick.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Very frustrating if you're using Adobe CS5. So with this button selected, I'm going to shrink it down a bit. And I'm going to give it the background color of the lighter orange. Put it right in the middle, and then we're going to put a stroke on it of the burgundy color. And then in the stroke panel, we're going to make that, say, 4 pixels. So we have the background color of the lighter orange, and then we have the border color with the darker burgundy color. Then let's grab our text tool, just type in button, and we will use Helvetica for this. So with that button text selected, let's now grab the Helvetica character and change the typecase to uppercase. And let's take off that kerning. So right now it's at -100 because we just did that to the logo. So we are going to set that to 0. And let's go from regular to bold and change the color to white. And put it at, I would say 14, nope, not 14, 18 pixels. Center it. There we go. So that's our default button. Now, let's create the hover state. So I'm going to grab the button, deselect the background, hold Alt, and slide it over, and that duplicates it. And now for the hover state, I'm just going to make the stroke white. And then the active state, so that's the state when it's actually clicked. Let's again grab the hover state, duplicate it, and slide it over. And let's give this a drop shadow inset.
So it looks like it's pressed down.
So it looks like it's pressed down. So it'll actually put a shadow on the inside of the button.
Cool.
So when it's pressed, the shadow is then on the inside. So it looks like it's actually being pushed down.
Sounds good.
So let's go to Effect, Stylize, and let's do an inner glow. And select Fleck mode to normal, color to black. Let's put preview on so we can see how it looks. And let's bump up the blur. You can see it's pressed in. Now I want to change the background color here to the darker burgundy, as well as the stroke. So when it's pressed in, it really looks like it's pressed in.
That looks good.
All right. Passing this over, there's 3 separate states. There's default, there's hover, and then there's active. Active is when it's pressed. So I'm going to pass this over to Gil.
Sure. So I'll start with the nav element in our markup here. Now I'll just have an unordered list to contain our links. And inside of it, I'll just add list item, then the anchor element. So for our button, we're just calling it button. All right.
It fits,
so
right?
I'll go ahead and we'll do 3 of them. So this will be button 1. So I'll just duplicate this twice. All right, so it looks like we're good to go there. So in our CSS, first I'll select the nav, and I'll position this absolute. Now before I do this, I'll need to add a position relative here to our header. That way anything we position inside the header will be relative to the header. Mm-hmm. So our nav, I need to position it absolute first, otherwise it won't do anything. So left, we'll position it 222 pixels. Actually, what's the actual? How do you figure out in Illustrator the actual precision?
I mean, right now I have these buttons. They are.
I'll say that's about 15 pixels right there.
Yeah, from top, so they're about 55 pixels high, with a 4-pixel stroke on it. So what's that put it at? 59.
Oh, you're talking about the width of the buttons. Okay.
That's the height.
Okay.
Of the button. So I mean, yeah, if you do, would you say 15 from the top?
Yeah, 15 from the top as far as positioning.
Yeah.
For the height of the buttons, I'm not going to define a width or a height.
Right.
I'm actually, I'm going to display them block, and then I will add a padding. That way the clickable area is much larger, and we're letting our content sort of dictate the width and height. We're not giving them fixed widths and height. So I'll give it a top and bottom margin of 10 pixels, a left and right of 20. So I'll go ahead and add a border radius for those nice little rounded corners you have.
10.
Thank you, Matt.
10 pixels.
You got it. And finally, let's go ahead and add a background color, which is the same color.
Yeah, let's do the lighter color.
The lighter orange. Bingo.
Yep.
So we'll do that. And before I do that, since we have our navigation and an unordered list, I'll need to float them to the left. So I'll select the list items in the nav, and I will float them left. I'll also apply margin right just to space them out. Let's go ahead and do 12 pixels. Cool. Now that we have that, there is a border, correct? All right.
Yep. So the border, 4 pixels.
4 pixels.
Yep.
So I'll go ahead and apply a border, 4 pixels solid, and I will use that darker orange.
Correct. What's the? I think it's the burgundy color, the darker, all the way.
Okay.
Dark one. Yep.
We're going. So let's see how that's looking. Cool. So now you see how the buttons are blue, so I'll just need to make the color white. Now we have the buttons. Now we need to add the active and the hover states. So we'll just go ahead and add it underneath here. So for the hover state, the color, the
It's
border,
just changing the border color to white.
We'll do a border color of white. Before I do that, I need to add the A, then the pseudo class there. All right. Let's go ahead and refresh that.
Perfect.
That's looking about right. Now let's just go ahead and add the active state. So I'll just let's go ahead and copy that, And we're setting the border back to its original color. So I'll just do a border color of inherit. And to achieve that press look, I'll just add a inset box shadow. So
Perfect, yeah.
go ahead and do that. So inset actually sets the shadow inside of the element instead of outside. So I will apply 0 and 0x and y offsets. That way it'll just apply it to every side evenly. And I'll add the blur to about 6 pixels. What was the effects blur you added there?
On the inset?
On the inset, correct.
You can put it at, just put it at like 10 pixels.
10 pixels.
Yeah.
Cool.
This is always one of the things too, is when dealing with designing in application to browser, it's always good to jump back and forth. Because sometimes you might actually be designing in the application, and then you'll go ahead and jump in the browser and see how it looks. It might look a little bit different. Then you'll jump back in the application. So it's always good to play around with, like in this case, it's in Illustrator, it's an inner glow, whereas in CSS, it's a box shadow inset. So it's good to jump back and forth. How is that? How did that end up looking?
Well, now I'm just going to go ahead and it looks great actually. So I'm just going to change the background color of our link here to the darker orange. And I think we're all set. Let's go ahead and refresh that. So there's our hover state and there's our press state.
Nice. Perfect. Yeah.
There you go.
And that's at 10 pixels?
10 pixels.
Nice.
Cool.
Now, if we wanted to actually add a drop shadow to the hover state, we can do that fairly easily, right?
We could, to the drop shadow of the actual button.
The hover state of the button, right?
Yeah. Actually, now that you mentioned drop shadow, I want to add a text shadow to our nav, just to kind of give it a little separation here.
Okay, pick the buttons up a little bit.
Sure. So I'll add a text shadow, 0x offset, about 1y. And let's just try this darker shade here. So there you go. So now they stand out a bit. So
Nice.
You were mentioning what we could do to add a drop shadow to the hover state.
Right. Well, let me let's jump back over into Illustrator.
Cool.
Let me add my drop shadows on my text on my buttons, so we're on the same page. And then, yeah. So for the hover state, if we could do, say 2 pixels. Did you have it 2 pixels or 1 pixels for the text?
The text shadow?
Yeah.
I have it set to 1 pixel.
1 pixel? Okay.
That looks pretty good on the screen.
Nice. Yeah, that works good. Yeah, so for the hover state, we can add a drop shadow to that actual button, correct?
Sure.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and do that in Illustrator. And Effect, and Stylize Drop Shadow. And I'm going to probably put that to say 4. Like so.
Nice.
And you can easily do that with
Yep, we can
CSS,
do that.
right?
So in our hover state, we'll go ahead and just add a box shadow. And since we're only doing the Y offset, that you said that was 4 pixels?
Yes.
Cool. And then let's go ahead and take this color value. And let's see what that looks like. Oh, there you go. So there's our box shadow on our hover effect.
Rendered out perfect. All right. So last piece we're going to do is we're going to add in some social icons to the right side of the header. We're going to add in a Facebook icon and a Twitter icon. So I already have these 2 icons in place here. So let's open up my layers panel and let's unlock the social icons, which I have out here, which are in vector format. And I'm going to place the Twitter icon first, and then I'm going to place the Facebook icon and position them all the way to the right. And select these 2 icons and give them the darker burgundy color.
Nice.
And then the hover state would actually be white. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, I'm going to have to send over Gil some images. But this isn't the case. What we're actually going to do is Gil's going to actually use font face in CSS.
Yep, we're using icons from symbolset.com. They provide some icon fonts that are compatible with all browsers. And as you'll see here, I've downloaded this file containing a web fonts folder, and the font pack we're using is SS Social, which contains pretty much every icon or logo of every social media app or service out there. So that's what we need.
Awesome.
Cool. So I've included that in our project folder here. So here we see files, file types, SVG, EOT for IE9, TTF, WAF, SVG. And that's really great because they are scalable at any resolution or any font size, especially these days now that Retina is huge.
Yeah.
It's important to have these kind of file types in there. So to include these, all we need to do is, in our style sheet, we need to import this sssocial.css file. So up here, I'll just go ahead and add the import rule. And the file is located in our web fonts folder, sssocial. So what sssocial.css does, it uses, it's a clever use of pseudo elements and substring matching attribute selectors. There's a lot going on there. They actually replace the content you put in there based on like what social media service you write.
Right.
And it renders out the icon.
So if it's showing the Twitter icon, it's actually reading Twitter in the code.
Correct. Yeah, it's all semantic, and it's a great service. So we'll mark this up in our markup here in our HTML. So I will use a div to wrap those social icons, which is fine. You can use a paragraph, a span, but here I'm using a div. And I will actually give it a class of social icons. Cool. And then I'll just mark them up as anchor elements. So we'll do the Twitter first, right?
Yep. Twitter icon first.
Twitter
and then
icon
Facebook.
first. And now, in order to have this font service work, we'll need to add a class of SS icon. And because we are using the circle icons, we'll need to add SS social circle.
And you added that right in the class, right?
Yep, right in the class, and it does all the work for you. So just go ahead and copy that and do the Facebook one. So there's our logos, there are our icons, and we haven't positioned them yet or anything, but as you can see, it worked.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool. So that's done.
So much easier
Right?
than making like, you know, the A tag and then
Image replacement.
Yeah.
How fast was that?
throwing in the image. And then when you scale it up in Retina, it comes out all blurry and your site looks like it's bootleg.
Yeah, I'll show you an example. So I'll select our social icon. Social icons, I named it. Social icons div. And I'll position that, position absolute. Right position of 20 pixels. So now we'll go ahead and scale those icons up so you can see how awesome they look even at the biggest font sizes. So I'll select these, the anchor elements inside of social icons. And the color is the darker orange, right?
Yeah, it's like the burgundy color.
Cool. Burgundy. Now the font size I'll give them is about 3 Ms, but let's go ahead and apply 10 M to see how that looks.
Just to blow it up.
Blow it up. Look how large
That's
it looks.
awesome.
Yet it's as crisp and clear as it did when it was
Because if that was a
smaller.
normal PNG,
Yeah.
it would look super blurry if it was smaller. And even if it was that large to start off with, the loading time on it would be, you know, so much. It would take so much longer to load than it actually would, you know, the typeface.
Yep. It's one less thing to process, and it'll also look great on your phone, too.
Yeah.
For mobile. All right, so we'll position at 3M, and let's go ahead and about 18 pixels from the top. 15 pixels from the top. All right, let's go ahead and do 18. Actually, 20 will work better. Cool. Now, all I need to do is apply the color, and I need to add the anchor tag, of course. So there's that. Let's go ahead and give them a margin left. So we'll do 12 pixels. Cool. And then our hover state is just a color of white, right?
Correct.
All right, that's easy enough. So we'll do that. And there you go.
Perfect.
Cool, that's looking good.
I like that header. Looks good.
Yeah, that's a great design.
Yeah. All right. So, I mean, as you can see, you know, some designers like designing in the browser. Some designers like designing in applications. Depending on the project, you might go back and forth. You might start off on paper and then bring it into an application. You might backpedal, go back onto paper if it's not working, or jump right into the browser. Pretty much depends on the project or what you're comfortable with. It's always a good idea to play around with other methods just to keep yourself fresh and to really find what works for you.
Sure, we all have our different process, and this just shows that you shouldn't limit yourself to one thing. You know, you could just as easily design something in the browser with similar results as you would in Image Editor or in Illustrator.
Awesome. Found
So
it.
that'll do it, buddy.
Great job.
Thanks, guys. I'm Gil Hernandez.
I'm Matt Helm, and this is Treehouse Workshop.
We'll see you next time.